Sure.
Okay.
You got the head?
Yeah. 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 4.
Sick.
Awesome, dude. Let's talk for a bit, man.
Sure.
That was good to play.
Fuck yeah, man. Sounding great.
You too. And we got some good audio.
Right on.
Whoa.
And bumping all kinds of things around here. So, let's start with your name. Who are you, my friend?
Christian Saulnier-Ferguson.
Saulnier. Let's stop there.
Yeah.
That's a unique middle name.
My mom's side of the family is French Canadian.
French
so,
Canadian. Oh.
Yeah, and it's a hyphenated last name, so it doesn't fit on a lot of things. So
That's not even your middle name. That's your hyphenated last name.
Christian Curtis Saulnier-Ferguson.
I got it. Okay, my mistake.
Yeah.
I've heard that about the French Canadian culture. Yeah, they have hyphenated last names. Very common there, I've heard.
Yeah, and I ended up going by Ferguson a lot just because Saulnier is hard to spell.
Ooh.
and it's hard to pronounce too. So I remember, because officially my name is Saulnier-Ferguson, and at school I'd get a call from the office. Could Christian Saulnier?
Okay, so that's how it's spelled.
how
I
it's
was
spelled.
struggling in my mind to know how to spell it based on the pronunciation.
Saulnier.
Saulnier.
Yeah, you don't even say the L. I don't think.
Saulnier.
Saulnier.
Yeah.
It's It's said Sonyay. Yeah, it's pretty ridiculous. But
if I could show you my phone in my contacts, you would see that you are still listed as Christian Guitat, because I spelt guitar wrong on the day I met you at Asylum
That's
for
funny.
Art. You remember that?
Yeah.
And I entered your contact information as Christian Guitar because I didn't ask you your last name.
Yeah.
Had I known what I was getting into, if you said Saulnier, then I would have had a trouble spelling.
It's still kind of I don't know if I'm gonna go by Ferguson, or if I'm gonna put the Saulnier in, because I've heard that thing where people with weird names don't get job opportunities. You know what I mean?
This theme has come up before on this very podcast.
Oh, yeah?
The first, neither of these are published yet, obviously, but this one obviously. But my friend Dean, his last name is Steinman.
Oh yeah.
And he's an aspiring jazz singer in general. I don't want to lump him into one genre, but he's a great singer, and he taught himself to sing. Well, I keep saying taught himself, but I see the initiative that he took to do it. Right, as an adult, it takes a lot of initiative. He learned how to sing during COVID, and he took lessons, and he practices all the time, like you do.
Yeah.
So here's what I want to say by way of thank you for being on the show, if we're going to call it that. It isn't anything yet, but it's an idea that I had because you were coming to stay for the weekend. And so you, in my mind, were the perfect first guest for what I've always wanted to do, which is like a Marian McPartland piano jazz kind of casual hang sesh, play duo shit. I got 2 pianos in here, drums. I got the amps, bass players are welcome, singers. And but Dean and I happened to have a rehearsal scheduled on Saturday.
Oh yeah.
So I sort of ambushed him with this setup, and I'm like, we're gonna record a podcast.
Yeah,
and he's like, what?
Yeah.
So, but you were absolutely the first person I wanted to have on it, and I'm thrilled that you're here because
I'm thrilled to be here.
You're a monster player.
Oh, well, thanks, man.
And B, I can see your passion for sharing your knowledge. So
absolutely, yeah.
I want to get into that. Let's talk about how you got into music. How did you start learning music, and what?
I mean, if we're gonna go back as far,
we want to know. I'm looking at which
my dad had an acoustic guitar. I remember my mom got him an acoustic guitar for his birthday. He had one of those. I don't know if you know the Ovation guitars. The backs are made of helicopter material, and they were really popular in the 80s and 90s. If you go look, every famous person is playing an Ovation in that era.
So was it a fairly high quality guitar then?
I would say so. Actually, Harry, the guy I was playing music with yesterday, I went and jammed with him, and he had an Ovation in there, and I pointed out hey, you got one of these.
Did it bring back? I'm getting ahead of myself here.
Anyways, yeah, he showed. It was the first band that I was really into was Kiss.
Ooh.
Yeah. And
I'm going to pause here because we jumped right in, and we need to establish a little bit more about your basics. Where are you from? You live, because you don't live in Calgary, right?
No, I live in Medicine Hat, Alberta right now. I'm originally from Tofield, Alberta.
Tofield.
I
would struggle to spell that as well.
T-O field.
No E in there. It's not like toe.
Yeah, no, yeah, exactly. That was always the joke. Just a field full of toes. I used to picture that a lot.
Yeah.
But yeah,
it'll be hard to forget that now.
It's got, I can't remember how many people, but it's this very small town. I guess it would be considered in the greater Edmonton area.
Oh, that's where you were born?
That's where I was born, and then later my parents got divorced, and then I ended up moving to Sherwood Park.
Okay,
which is
I know that, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, if you live
How
in
old are we talking about here? What age were you?
When I moved to Sherwood Park, I would have been 8.
And weave music back in. Did you know about music? Were you interested in this ovation guitar back then?
So like rock and roll, like my dad listened to a lot of hair metal. So like Kiss, Poison was big, like
nice.
and other rock bands in general too. I remember like my dad would always quiz me on who, like, hey, like the radio would come on and be like, who's playing here? I'd be like, I don't know. He'd be like, guy not from this country. I'm like, I don't know. Foreigner, come on, you know.
You know who that reminds me of? I hope if your dad listens to this or when he listens to this.
Well, I actually got to say he's passed away.
Christian, that's a big faux pas, my friend.
It's all good, man. It's all good. I'm not bitter about
condolences. I mean, however belated they are, I'm sorry.
Oh yeah, no worries. All good.
I was just gonna say that
it's not something most people assume. So,
yeah. But have you seen the movie School of Rock?
Yes.
Jack Black.
Yeah, I loved that movie.
And see,
still do.
When he was getting so passionate that these kids in this classroom didn't know anything about the history of rock music, and he was like,
yeah.
And then he sets up a whole new curriculum, and he's like, we're gonna do rock history, rock appreciation, and then he's drawing all on the blackboard. And that sort of reminded me of that same vibe when you were saying your dad's like, call the name of the band.
Yeah,
like he wanted you to be able to identify them by ear, right?
Yeah, so now I, like, when it comes to jazz, I think that I have that where if a recording comes on, I try to know who's on. And so like I remember the other day, so I did I'm about to toot my own horn here, but
please do, man. You're a very talented person, and people need to hear about all your accomplishments.
Thanks, man. I play a duo with this lady, Jessica Babe, and in Medicine Hat, and we do like indie rock.
I'm going to interject here. I'm sorry, but can I ask, because I want to weave another topic back which is the concept of stage names.
Oh, Jessica Babe's her real name.
Her real name. So no need for a stage name when your last name is Babe.
Yeah, and then
awesome.
We have a band. Her brother Garrison Babe's in it.
Garrison Babe. That's like a real. I love that name.
Yeah,
I feel like if you're born with that name, you're destined for something.
That's a question we get a lot. Is that your real name? It is, in fact, her real name.
I love it. I love it.
Yeah.
Is it spelled B-A-B-E? So that's how people can look up Jessica Babe?
Yeah, absolutely.
You play with her?
Yeah, we play with her. We have a band called Jessica Babe and the Hey What's That is the band name. Okay. And she has some singles right now. We're working on an album. But anyways, yeah, we're playing this Norah Jones tune. And I was kind of proud of myself because I was listening to it. The drummer was playing like a real slow waltz on the brushes, or you could call it a 6/8 feel, whatever it is.
Yeah.
And I noticed, I'm like, that's got to be a really good drummer, because like rock drummers, even though it's simple, like a simple slow waltz, it was like slower than slow, and that's a challenging thing to play. And then B, it's like rock guys don't know how to use brushes really. So I was like, that's got to be a really good drummer. And then I hear the guitar player. I'm like, that sounds like Bill Frisell. And so I look up the personnel. Sure enough, it's Brian Blade on drums and Bill Frisell on guitar. And I was kind of proud of myself.
Very
I was like,
cool, man.
I can recognize a guitar player even when
on a pop tune, basically.
Yeah, it was kind of like
jazzy. Like it wasn't there.
I think Norah Jones dips like. I don't know as much about Norah Jones as I would like to admit.
Well, I understand she's Ravi Shankar's daughter.
Oh, really?
And he was, I don't know much about him. So here my ignorance is going to come out again. I don't know if he's living still or not, but he was a sitar player.
Okay.
And so musical family. So, okay.
Absolutely.
Let's talk about when you got a guitar in your hands or any instrument in your hands and you started to connect with it.
Yeah.
What happened
here? Again, like my dad had the guitar and he would play things, like this kind of thing. Obviously, like.
As it's thorn, right? So Poison?
Yeah, literally. Yeah, exactly. He would play that.
Night.
And so then
Dude, keep going.
I had a toy guitar, and I would play this. I would play that.
Did he have an amp? Was he, or was it just an acoustic?
He was an acoustic, and I had a toy guitar that the toy guitar actually had like frets, and it had a string missing, so it had the high E missing. There was 5 strings on it, and then I eventually started plucking around on my dad's guitar. I think he showed me like a power chord.
Yeah.
So then I can play some rock and roll now.
What age are we talking about here again? You said 8-ish or earlier than that?
Well, that would have been when I moved to Sherwood Park. But when I started like touching the guitar, like as early as I can remember, even so, like 4 or 5. But I never really like, you know, until my dad showed me like a power chord, and then he showed me those simple
So once
chords.
you got the hang of that
Yeah,
stuff.
I started to get the hang of that, and I started looking at Kiss. I started like trying to mimic Kiss songs.
Yeah.
And I think one of the first songs I learned was like a Motley Crue song.
I love that.
I think it was Dr. Feelgood. I think I was playing Dr. Feelgood.
Ding,
Yeah, and it's in. I remember it being in.
Can you
drop
play a
B.
little bit of it? I know that album. Oh, come on, see if you can. Maybe the muscle memory. Yeah, there you go.
Yeah. Something like that. Right? Something like that.
Okay,
right?
now I want to pause here.
Yeah.
Thank you for doing that. Did you play along a lot with that record to learn that song? Like, did you have that tape or record back then?
My dad had Sirius Radio, and so one of the radio stations is Hair Nation because the hair.
Okay.
Right?
Can I ask? Is it okay? When were you born? Because I feel like there's I'm thinking about
1998.
98.
98.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yes. The
So-
year I got married.
Oh yeah! Wow.
I'm no longer married, but I did get married in 1998.
Yeah.
Anyways, so, dude, because I just have never really even asked how old you are, so I haven't established.
So 26 this year.
You're 26, and so a different generation, obviously. Yeah. And I'm thinking about cassette tapes and listening over and over again with headphones on.
Well, my dad had CDs and stuff, and it was really just the radio. And then also he had.
So how did you learn that Feel Good song? You just heard it on the radio. And
I heard it. It was the radio.
You didn't play along with it.
Whenever it would come on, I would try to play along to it.
Wow.
And I think that was.
That's a bit of a hardship for people in this modern age with Spotify, where it's like,
oh yeah.
You can listen. So you're a teacher. Let's talk a little bit about
sure.
that, because you see different now. You'd see different things, even though in my mind you're very, like, if I ever call you're one of my favorite young musicians. I don't mean the word young. I say it.
I guess technically I'm young
because I'm 47.
There was
just turned 47.
There was a downbeat poll where Ari Honig got named as one of the recent downbeat poll where Ari Honig was under like the up and coming musicians.
What?
Yeah, and it's like how old is he?
Have you heard of him?
Yeah, exactly. He's been around since the fucking 90s.
Anyways, you are one of my favorite musicians though to play with.
Yeah, well,
there's a great connection there.
But so as far as teaching goes. I mean, I guess I could talk about, like, there's definitely, I notice when I teach a lot of young kids, right? And I notice there is a difference in the relationship people have with music nowadays. At least, you know, I mean, I'm only 26, but I still find myself saying, back in my day.
Yeah, exactly.
Back in my day, like, I remember when I was a kid, everybody started getting iPods. And so even with an iPod, you had to know what song you were buying. You had to know what album you were buying. So like me and my buddy, we got this Nickelback album or whatever. I knew some people that liked Nickelback. And, you know, like I had a buddy.
That's okay. Yeah, there's a stigma around it, apparently.
It's fine. But yeah, I know. And also, too, like I had a buddy who was really into Green Day. And I remember like he went out of his way to buy every single CD. Own the physical copy of it. Went and saw them live when they came through Edmonton, and like, so when I was
different relationship to music,
and so
you
now
cared about bands, you saved up, you planned a little bit more.
We knew what we were listening, even at the level of if you were listening to like One Direction or something. At least you were into a group, right?
And you knew the album. That was the
exactly,
thing. I mean, I'm guilty of it too, jumping around just from song
to
song.
Yeah.
People used to sit down and listen to full albums.
And so it actually takes discipline now when I'm on Spotify. If I find a track I like, to go under, bump the mic, to go under and like find view album and then go to the album and listen to the album through. That's
something you do regularly?
Yeah, wow. I try to do that where like I mean, there's certain albums like if we're not even jazz, like David Bowie, the Ziggy Stardust and the Spiders from Mars. That's an album I love to listen to start to finish if I have the chance.
Really?
Yeah, because I mean, I know he didn't mean it this way, but it's like a story from beginning to end. There's a lot of, it sounds like it's a play. Like you could make a play out of that album.
When was the first time you hered that record? I'm not familiar with it, and that's a little ailment that I have, which is a narrow.
Maybe 2017, 2018, or maybe even earlier, 2016.
Okay.
The same friend who was into Green Day is now a massive David Bowie fan.
David Bowie,
and owns every single one of his albums on vinyl, and he's got a lot of them. Right?
Does he have a nice hi-fi system he listens to?
Does.
So then you must love going over there and.
Oh yeah, he lives in
listening.
Edmonton. Yeah,
Oh.
I see him whenever. My buddy Taylor, shout out Taylor. We used to call him T-Shibs back in the day because his name is Taylor Shabal.
T-Shibs, I love it.
T-Shibs,
Yeah.
But, yeah, so he got really into David Bowie, and then I started digging into it because he was into it. And then David Bowie came out with his last album. I think it was Black Star was what it was called, and then he died, and it messed me up.
Wow,
because,
really? Oh.
Well, it messed me up because like I was just getting into David Bowie, and and like the variation of his career, like how he was able to go from, I mean, this sort of, I guess you could call it like psych rock, glam rock, but it had his own spin on it, and then to go into more like funk-oriented spaces and deal with like more synthesizer stuff.
So are you now familiar with his body of work, you would say? You've listened to most or a lot of it?
I wouldn't claim to be, like, I listened to a bunch of it, but I wouldn't claim to be like a big David Bowie head. But I definitely dig his stuff, and I listened to his last, like Mark Juliana was on his last album. Like a bunch of really.
Can I say I don't even know who that is?
He's a great like more modern jazz drummer.
Oh, okay.
I guess you could call him
I don't
jazz.
follow that,
He digs into a lot of different genres.
Well, dude, you know you've seen my system downstairs, right? You should go listen to some stuff. Let's take a little sip of your coffee.
I did want to get back to teaching.
Yes, exactly.
So
let's go back to that.
Like at the there's something like Thelonious Monk said, you have to dig it to dig it. You dig? And so I always say that because I have a student who, I have multiple students who I ask them, like, what are you listening to? And they're like, well, either I don't know, nothing, or a little bit of everything. And to me, those are kind of like very similar answers, because people who say they listen to a little bit of everything are just kind of like, they're just listening in a general way, and it's kind of whatever's on. They don't
background noise almost,
exactly,
right?
right.
Yeah. Not intentional listening.
Then there's people who I don't really know what I listen to. Like they're not going out of their way. And then I have students who straight up, they just aren't listening to music. And it's like trying to be a baker. You've never had a slice of bread, right?
Hey, now I think, well, what is there? Do you have a theory as to why that is, or?
I mean, this has been said before, but social media, I think, not even just Spotify, but literally just scrolling on Instagram. That's how people are consuming content nowadays.
Yeah,
people aren't really interested. I've noticed the switch from art to content, because that happened within my lifetime in very formative parts of my life, right?
Wow.
So I noticed, I remember when YouTube was a little simpler, and there was I remember somebody got 4 million subscribers, and that was huge. And now that's lower level as far as the influencers go. There's tens of millions.
So then you you get into this content machine because advertisers want their message to reach lots of subscribers. So you're saying maybe the distinction is that art is a different thing than content?
Yeah, definitely.
Or content can be artistic,
It can be. And I find myself scrolling on Instagram and finding every now and again some really nice stuff.
Beautiful stuff, yeah.
And then at the same time finding somebody who's literally just trying to game the algorithm.
Yeah.
I think there is a difference between art and content for sure. Especially.
Yeah. What I would say, this is this is content in a way, because it's just us having a conversation and doing something.
Sure.
But if we were gonna dig in and work for a while on a duo record,
that'd be
when
art.
we created that together, or when we perform it on stage at the Bella, which we should endeavor to do someday.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
Probably with a band behind us too.
Oh,
duo
yeah.
stuff's fun, but that would be art.
Yeah, absolutely.
But you're still sharing valuable information, right?
I mean, I listen to podcasts and stuff. I don't think there's necessarily anything wrong with content, but it's when people get the two conflated. And I noticed, so with kids, it's you know, to go out of your way to put on a song on, even on Spotify, to go out of your way and then sit there and just listen to something, as opposed to like get on Instagram and start scrolling. Because part of it is because all those social media platforms use the same tactics that slot machines use to keep them seated, right? They do. It's the same thing, like the bright colors and the instant gratification of you scroll and immediately you've got something
new to distract your frantic mind.
And I'm guilty of it too. Like I find that it's now an effort not to do it.
You had some advice you're telling me yesterday that you said to one of your students about the phone when they go into the listening room. I told him
because I was asking him, like, he pulls up he's gonna know I'm talking about it.
But you love and respect your students because you want them to learn and grow, right?
So I sent him. We're not naming anyone. I sent him some because I was like, "What song would you want to learn?" He's like, "Oh, I don't know. I don't really listen to much." And I was like, "Okay." I sent him a guitar playlist, and it had everything. Like Andre Segovia was on it, and then Van Halen to like Robert Johnson to Mac DeMarco is even on there because he plays guitar, right? So just try to get as like a broad scope.
I love it.
The
so
guitar.
A little bit of over and above effort for you as a teacher. Anyone that is looking, are you looking for students? Well, let's market your teaching.
Yeah, hit
You're
me
a great
up,
teacher, man.
But so I show him, like, he really digs into like Wes Montgomery. I'm like, oh, sick, great, Wes Montgomery. It's gonna be tough, but we can dig into it, right? And so one day I say, like, okay, you got to pick something we got to learn. You got to pick a song so that means you have to listen to some music. Listen to a song all the way through.
Oh, this is exactly.
Yeah, and so he brings me, I think it was "While We're Young" is the standard that Wes played, and Wes
solo guitar version.
Solo guitar version. I think it's one of the only solo guitar things he did. Maybe I'm ignorant, but as far as I know, he only ever really played with a group. And he comes to me with this arrangement, and I'm like, oh, great, perfect. This would be awesome because it's a lot of, as much, you know, it's a lot of basic chords, right? Like a lot of, like, I think it starts out.
Oh, nice.
That's how it starts, right?
Yeah, great.
So those are such basic shapes where I'm like, oh yeah, any jazz guitar player should know those shapes. Yeah. And to do it in the context of a song, great. But then I ask him, I go, did you listen to the whole thing? He goes, I listened to like 3/4 of it.
Oh, couldn't make it all the way through.
It's a 2-minute track. Like, and so I was like, okay. Here's what you do. You put it in a playlist with a bunch of other Wes Montgomery stuff because he's shown me multiple Wes tracks that he likes.
So you're like, okay, can I pause here and just interject because did you watch Bill Evans' Universal Mind? It's him and his brother sitting down. There's a grand piano. They talking about music.
Yeah.
At the beginning, there's this beautiful quote, and it's his voice saying it. And he says something to the effect of, I believe everyone is in possession of what I call the universal musical mind.
Oh, yeah.
And when they hear music that was created, you know, sort of by the same mind, their mind responds to it. So I would value the sort of discerning layman's opinion of his art sometimes over, or maybe exclusively, I can't remember how he said it, but the seasoned jazz professional because of their familiarity with everything to do with the mechanics of creating it. They lose that sense of like just the artistic impression of the thing. Right? And it happens to me with music. I analyze it. Then all of a sudden your left brain's getting too involved.
Well, you know what?
Or that part of you.
I do, because, you know, in the groups that I play, and we're always discussing about how something's going to come off and what we should do with our group. And I always have to say, like, you know, forget all the theory, forget all the fancy stuff. You know, you could do, you know, you play out, you could do all the like chord substitutions, sharp 11, whatever it is. Yeah. There is something to be said about the way somebody reacts involuntarily to whatever music they hear.
Do you want to play? Can you play the chicken solo? And I'll do some brushes.
Sure, yeah.
Because we've never done that before. I heard you doing it earlier. I know the song fairly well, so I'll see what happens with me on the brushes.
Sure, yeah.
And we'll just groove a little bit because I had this visualization earlier today, Christian, which was that, you know, everything is energetic waves, right? We are molecules, or the atoms that make up our body are just waves, right? That are collapsed into particles. But I was coming upstairs and I could hear you playing the drums, and I was like, okay, fascinating.
Yeah.
That the sound waves from those drums are bouncing everywhere. If we could see them, they'd be flying all over this room.
Yeah.
And then there's frequencies of light that we can't see, but we know
yeah.
that light can carry information, right, and
Yeah.
all that stuff. So I sort of even invited and welcomed into this space an openness to that sort of universal mind of just creative flow that is kind of out there all the time. And then when I think Kenny Werner talks about that river of just creative flow that's always available. And then when you can step into it in the same vicinity as the other person, then you find these creative ideas happen together, right?
Oh,
so
yeah,
let's do that and try and get into the flow. I'll just follow you because I don't know how you play this song, but I can keep time and try and groove along.
Absolutely,
okay?
yeah.
Let's do it.
Let's do
the
that,
chicken.
yeah. The chicken.
I wonder if I need a mic. We've got enough mics in this room.
Yeah.
Maybe a bit lower. loosey-goosey. I'm a bit loosey-goosey on the drums these days.
No, that sounded great, man.
Because I'm like, wait, how do I do a straight groove with brushes? I hadn't really worked out how to do a proper backbeat.
I never worked out playing the chicken without a bass player or drummer.
Okay, there we go.
So,
but
perfect. We're
now,
both out of our element.
You know, you and I would agree on this point. I don't think anyone would probably disagree that the real fundamental thing, really, even like not just with a song like that, is when you're playing with someone else in a style that has a constant tempo and is to feel that together, to feel the pulse, right? And let's talk a little bit about some of your students' inability to feel that pulse. Like that's a fascinating thing to someone that comes naturally to me and you, right?
Well, you know what? I think if it's I think adults, there's this misconception that adults can't learn music as quickly as kids, and that's just totally false.
Yeah.
I've just taught enough kids and I've taught enough adults to know that adults are picking these things up quicker than kids are.
Yeah. That's encouraging.
Seriously,
Yeah.
There's only one thing that I would think would matter as a kid, and that's if you wanted to learn perfect pitch. It's impossible to learn perfect pitch past a certain age, and actually impossible for some people to ever learn perfect pitch because there's a gene where if you don't have that gene, you'll never learn perfect pitch.
Do you know people with perfect pitch?
I do.
Yeah.
And I'll tell you right now, it does not translate into musicianship. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It can help. Let's say if you're really into transcribing stuff, I'm sure it helps, right? And or if you're on the bandstand and somebody does a weird out of key thing and you can hear exactly what they did, that's great. But really what you would want is relative pitch. But anyways.
I agree.
So
because all you're hearing, if you're hearing the perfect pitch, it's sort of like you just see all the letters or the colors or however that comes to you, but it doesn't have any sense to it. You don't know necessarily, unless you understand the underlying structure, right? So I like the idea of relative pitch for me because I don't have perfect pitch, but to know the quality of the chord and its relationship to the tonic.
Sure,
that's good to know. That's
to me is really important. But like adults, they've grown up, listening to music, and even people used to dance. I remember my grandma one time when I was young. I lived at my grandma's house for a bit, and I remember hanging out on like a Saturday night, and she goes, "Are there any dances for you to go to?" And I was like, "Grandma, kids don't go to dances anymore.
Yeah.
They go to concerts, they go to raves, but like, I rarely see people dancing at those things. Like,
and those dances used to have live bands usually.
Yeah,
right?
now
Wouldn't
it's
that
a
have been
DJ,
amazing?
So
let's talk a little bit. Sorry, we're going all over the place.
Oh yeah, here. So
let's wrap this up.
Inability to feel the beat. I mean, everybody has the ability to feel the beat. There's beat deafness is actually quite rare.
Okay, so because it's a pulse that people feel in their body.
And the way I tap into it is I have people count out loud. I heard this from Adam Neely actually on YouTube. I don't know if you know that.
Oh yeah, he's a piano teacher.
And he mentioned like if you ask somebody to count to 10, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and then you say no, count slower. They'll count slower. They go 1, 2, 3.
All the beats will be spaced evenly.
And because English is a fairly rhythmic language, even that statement, fairly rhythmic language, that's in time, right? And so I will have people start by, if they're playing, let's say, like I teach a lot of very basic chords, so like I'll have somebody go 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1.
While they're playing, they
playing,
count out.
Exactly. And so I actually had
that's a good way to connect
I had
those
an adult student who was trying to learn, or still like we're still kind of working on it, but Mrs. Robinson by Simon and Garfunkel. And he was playing the chord progression, and like I showed him like a pattern to strum, and he was grouping them together in a weird way, not knowing the pulse. And I said, okay, count out loud while you're doing it. Immediately he's playing in time, and I was like,
cool.
Please, do that more than you don't do it. More often than not, you should count to what you're doing and then build the habit of playing in time.
And can I ask a question? How many of your students regularly practice with a metronome? I'm sure that's something you're encouraging.
I mean, sometimes I have to work up to it with the guitar, especially because a lot of I did this thing the other day where I took my guitar and I flipped it and played it left-handed. And that gave me a little bit of insight into how difficult it is, because I've been playing guitar since I was like a little kid, right? And so I've always had some of that dexterity and that ability to like pluck a note and hit it at the same time with my left hand.
Right.
And so first we work up some dexterity, and then I make them put the guitar aside and I make them just pat to the metronome.
Yeah.
I work
on.
What
tempo are you at?
I start at 50 for them.
Okay.
Because I've heard people say, oh yeah, 40. Most people I meet, like when they're just getting into it, 40 is really hard to feel.
Yeah.
So if you're an experienced musician, 40 is great. The slower, the better.
Yeah.
But I start them at 50 because it's not too fast that it gets them overwhelmed, but it's not too slow that it's like a big space
it's like
of
moving target, and they're like
Yeah, exactly.
I wasn't on. Yeah.
And something I always have to, like, especially with kids, I have to show them, like, hey, so hear how you're off of the metronome. So what you want to do is you want to hear how you're off of the metronome. As soon as you hear that you're a little early or a little late, adjust. And as soon as I tell them that, they start getting better. Their brain turns on. They're no longer just going through the motions. They're actively trying to hit the metronome. And I've heard I've heard time described like this, where it's kind of like you're a guy with a motorcycle and the beats are like parking spaces. At first, you've got a big motorcycle and tiny parking space where you're lucky if you don't hit the sides, right? And then eventually your motorcycle gets smaller and your parking space gets bigger to where now eventually you get to a point where you can be a little bit to the right of the parking space or a little bit to the left, play ahead or behind, right? And so
let's demonstrate that.
Oh, sure.
Yeah, right. I'll do the drums or whatever you want.
Sure. Yeah.
It's probably simpler if you play behind the beat and I try and just.
I think I can do both, and I think so. If you just play like a simple
swing or what?
Yes, could be swing, could be like, or even just a beat, just a pulse. It's pretty
I'll just
easy.
do quarter notes.
There's a couple,
but I want to do it in a swing style, if that's okay.
Oh, sure, yeah. I'll just play
play something, and you'll tell us how you're moving the beat around. Okay?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah. Okay.
So I mean, it would start with quarter notes, right? Yeah. So
you want to count them in?
Yeah, sure. We could play it like a 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4, right? And so I might say, I'll play Prettiest One, like just. That to me is like right down the middle of the time, right? Part of it just comes from my technique. I'll just take my right hand and my left hand and just kind of try my best to. I'll even like pull away from the guitar so that there's more time to travel. So if I'm gonna keep it going, 1, 2, 3, 4. That's a little behind, right? And you can I go even further behind, but that might mess some people up on the band. That's like starting to get to the point where you're like, whoa, is that? And
you can work that in and out of your solos at certain points. You don't have to do a whole chorus like that, right?
Oh no, yeah, but a great person to listen to would be Dexter Gordon for that, because Dexter Gordon. There's this.
Let's do it over some language. Let's play a swing tune.
Yeah, I'll
and
play
I want
like
to hear
a blues or something.
Yeah. Just start
1, 2, 3, 4. So there was like, I would say in the first chorus, or like the first chorus specifically, I was kind of doing a more behind the beat type of thing.
Yeah.
In a way, like I'm not going to claim to sound anything like Dexter Gordon, but
certainly on the head you could hear it more
on
pronounced.
the
You're
head
really
too,
exaggerating
right?
it on the head.
And part of it is,
way.
and then another
was nice,
aspect of it too is like how straight or how swung you want to be.
Mm-hmm.
There's a great video of Ed Soph, the drummer, discussing ahead of the beat or behind the beat. He has he's just playing time on the ride, and he does one where it's just right down the middle, ding 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 ding. He does one where he does it behind the beat, and then he does one where it's ahead of the beat. And the difference that it does in his technique is when he plays behind the beat, he lifts his stick way higher so that it takes more time for the stick to travel.
Which is sort of what you were saying with pulling your hand away, right?
Yeah, and I'll do that like it's harder to do on the guitar in that exact way, because if you pull your hand away, then it's harder to get accurate. Whereas like the cymbal is this big space, right? But it's a similar kind of principle where I'm kind of taking my hand and purposefully moving it a little more sluggishly. But also while still trying to feel the regular pulse and trying not to get too jarred by if I hit something a little late compared to what you hit.
Yeah.
Still hearing that all and also. Part of that is with phrasing too, being able to play a concise phrase that sound, because part of rhythm is also notes, right? Like if you hearing chord tones on downbeats versus non-downbeats is a big aspect to how we hear rhythm. It's not. They're not,
because it's leading somewhere.
Exactly. Yeah. And so if I play a phrase that sounds like, okay, the downbeat's very clear in that phrase, even if it's a little behind what you're playing, the listener will fill in the gaps and then have this feeling. Like there's this recording of Dexter Gordon playing Sunny Moon for Two, is it? Or what? No, not Sunny Moon for is that this tune, the blues? I can't remember. It's this blues.
My lack of knowledge of jazz tunes would astound you. So no,
yeah,
I'm sorry.
But he's playing this blues, and what's the line? No, it's something like he plays some sort of, or maybe it was. It's just like a series of like that kind of thing.
Repeating phrase.
Yeah,
kind of
and the way and it pulls so far behind the beat, but then it comes back and lands. Nice, I always show like a lot of my friends that I go, listen, that sounds like magic right there. There's something.
What's the effect you think it has on the energy? Because we're talking about energy too, right? All these vibrations coming off the stage. Yeah. What happens when, like, I imagine a collective energy wave when everyone's hitting right on the beat, let's say, and all those waves are synchronized. Then when someone starts to pull away, you feel a tension or something.
The best I can explain it is it literally makes you feel like this.
Like you're pulled,
pulled back. Yeah, exactly.
I like that. Oh man, there's certain. I'm sure. Again, I really need to listen to more music, but there's genres where I've heard, like urban and hip hop kind of stuff that's just so. Everything's kind of displaced.
Well, if you listen to like Jay Dilla, like he's the big example, and he's not the only one to program his beats this way, but he would take like whatever the second hi-hat note is in a bar phrase or whatever and move it over just slightly.
To give
and
it
this
that
goes into where
sort of feel.
You if you're gonna mess with the time like that, you should be able to do it consistently. And Jay Dilla, because he's on a computer, if he moves something over and then duplicates that over the timeline,
it creates an effect.
It's out of time, but so consistently out of time that people can still groove to it, right?
Yeah. It gives you like I love that analogy of the motorcycle and the parking spaces, because you can maneuver, and the motorcycle is great because it's very maneuverable, right? It's not a car.
Yeah.
You can really swerve and come in and out and stay in time.
And I've also heard it described as like if you're sitting in a chair, you can lean forward in the chair. You can lean back in the chair. Actually, there's
always with a single point of reference.
Do you know Mr. Blue Sky by Electric Light Orchestra? It's a super famous song where like
I'm sure, but once again, I don't listen to music. I have to start.
Oh, there goes my pick. It's a pretty. I was playing it with.
It's like if it's not Bill Evans or Keith Jarrett, I don't know. No, just joking. Or Hank Jones.
It's literally just. Sun is shining in the sky. There ain't a cloud inside. It's in like.
Okay, that sounds familiar.
Yeah, it's in every happy scene in every movie.
Yeah,
and so that song is like. it's literally just leaning forward just a little bit. I was
Oh.
playing it with the band Jessica Babe and the Hey What's That, and we covered that song for one of our shows. And I told because it's so many downbeats in a row, people tend to drag their downbeats and rush their upbeats. And so because it's so many just downbeats in a row, I found that it was a little in the center, kind of behind. And I told my drummer Michael, I go, listen, Michael, this song is like a guy walking to work just a little briskly and leaning a little forward. And you can hear it in the first couple bars of the recording. I always play it for people and I say, listen closely, and you can hear it speed up just a touch.
Yeah.
And that was before everything had to be quantized, right? Like,
Well, and but I mean, I still think it's, I don't know. I've heard that, maybe I heard this, it's apocryphal or something, but I heard that the Beatles never used a click and stuff like that.
Or like Led Zeppelin's a great example. If you ever, there's a track I love, In My Time of Dying by Led Zeppelin. And Bonham on that, John Bonham on the drums. Like, John Bonham had this behind the beat thing that felt so good. And there's a reason, like, it's cliche almost now to talk about how good John Bonham's drum beat feels, but it's because it's true.
It feels,
And there's some fills toward the end where it's just behind the beat in a way where a lot of drummers tend to rush their fills, I find.
Totally.
And
I'm guilty of that.
But Bonham had it where he would pull it back just a little bit, and it felt like it had this sort of like whoa sort of feeling, right? And you feel
it in your body, right?
Yeah, exactly.
I think I heard someone say that like pocket was so deep you could just like fall right into it.
Yeah.
You know, and just sort of,
I remember I was early, like when I was first starting to play with groups, I was like, I had a group with my buddy Sam and my buddy Rylan, and we were young, we're trying to figure it out. And I still am. I'm always the one that's wagging the finger, trying to get us to get, like I don't like to be overbearing and tell everybody they suck. No.
But you want everyone to come along.
It's more of just a, hey, this is what needs to happen for it to sound good and for the audience to. And so one day, like they had like wild creative, Sam especially, my buddy, who now he's like into producing and stuff, and so he has like
keyboard player.
He plays and a little bit of drums. He was playing drums in the group at the time. And so on one hand, I was really happy with the wild creative energy that these guys were bringing because Sam would like do crazy polyrhythms and had crazy phrasing ideas and stuff. But the time wasn't happening, and where it was
so
like
then it didn't feel good. Even though it was
exactly.
complex.
So I literally did this. I go, okay, all right. This phone represents us. And this pocket represents a pocket. I want us to be in the pocket, right? And
beautiful.
So, I think that's super important.
And it comes down to listening to each other. We were talking about that the other day.
That's part of it too. I mean, I've been experiencing this living in Medicine Hat and not being able to play with people as much as I'd like to. I can play really cleanly in time all by myself. And of course, everybody thinks they can, right? But then I go to play with somebody and their sense of time is just slightly off. And like I like to listen, right? But sometimes that can be jarring if you're not used to it. So.
Well, that's what's working really well with our duo stuff. I think it's the time fundamentally, but
I
also
think we feel
we're
time
listening
very
pretty
similarly, in a way.
Well, you play drums, don't you?
A little bit. Like I
You
teach some drums, and I found that like the principles for teaching drums and the teaching guitar are simple. There's a lot of great knowledge out there about what to practice, but not a lot of great knowledge about how to practice. I find that, like, again, same thing with Instagram. I'll scroll all day and find people on Instagram making videos about how to do this trick or that trick, and then
because it's content, it has to be short. Right?
But then on top of that, they're selling PDFs of and that can be great. Personally, I've never bought a PDF of anything. If you show me one thing, I can do the rest. I can put it in every key. I can put it in every tonality.
That's right. Yeah, because are you? Let's talk a little bit about reading and theory and all that. Because did you go to school for this? How did you learn to get to this level?
Just constantly watching YouTube videos.
But then you must have been able to glean concepts and principles and translate it into effective practice.
Sure,
time.
yeah.
So let's talk about that. What's that mean?
The general rules of practice are, Like do something so slowly that you can't make a mistake.
Yeah.
And I always have to show my students like, oh, you're trying to play it as fast as you can. When really you should be trying to play it as slow as you can. And I do this, like, we practice so often. You just practice a simple, just that kind of open position C. And I'll show, because what they'll do is they'll move their hand a little too fast. Their fingers are moving, but then they'll hit the wrong string, and then they have to adjust.
Yeah.
Rather, I always show like, go so slowly that there's no detours when it comes to going from A to B. So I'll do this. I'll go. Monotonous, right? It's like
You know what I said? I like that. I was thinking about how, you can hear every note. You can like be a little bit more present. It puts your mind in a calmer state.
It does.
It
Relaxes you, and it ensures that, like, because I show people when I play scales and stuff, especially if you look at my right hand, my hand's not like,
It's very effortless. Yeah,
I'm not moving too much, right?
It's
And so it's like part of it is no fat on the thing, right? And then the next,
no unnecessary motion.
yeah, and
wasted
so
energy.
my general rule of practice is essentially the stick control method. Like, this, and it says to practice something 20 times in a row.
Yeah.
Now, I kind of, there's a little bit of brain science to be said here. I never start people off with 20 times in a row. I start them off with 2 times in a row. And then I make them take a 10-second break and then another 2 times in a row.
Before they're allowed to go on to the next thing, because what we do is tend to, in practice time, skip over stuff, just touch the surface, play everything too fast, want to sound good.
The amount of times I've heard people like in the music store try to play Donna Lee, and they get like the first few bars, and then they mess something up.
Yeah.
And like, oh man.
Let's play Donna Lee.
Oh, you want to play Donna Lee?
Yeah. I'll play piano though, because now I think I know the melody. I'd like to try and double it with you.
Okay,
but I don't want to do it blazing fast. Because this will introduce the concept of I can't play it at a ripping tempo.
Let's play it whatever tempo you like.
But I can play it like medium swing,
Yeah.
And sort of.
Yeah.
I probably could go slow swing, but let's try it.
Yeah, let's do it. Yeah. I like that tune a lot, actually.
Yeah, me too.
I like the changes on it.
Oh, and everyone says it's back home in Indiana.
Yeah.
Contrafact, right?
Yeah, absolutely, yeah. Okay.
That's okay?
Yeah, oh yeah.
Okay, we'll just go straight in.
Sure, yeah.
1, 2, 3, 4. I couldn't handle it.
Go.
But that's a fun tune.
It is a fun tune, and like, yeah. So, I mean, if I was to,
that was too fast. I illustrated the wrong side of that conversation by counting that one too fast.
So if I was to then give advice on how to practice that,
yeah,
start with maybe just like do phrase by phrase, right? Like practice.
Make sure there's no wrong notes or glitches, right? I have that problem.
Just practice that over. So what I would say
20
is
times that over.
20 times in a row, no mistakes, and as relaxed as you can. So ideally,
so slower is better.
I mean, I know you were talking a lot about mindfulness and stuff, and that's like I deal a lot with this when it comes to practice. Like I'll even have like I had some students where they couldn't sit still. And so I said, okay, I'm going to time you, see how long you can sit still for. And that was our lesson.
Yeah.
I literally just sat them there. I was like, okay, I'm going to time you. And so they started out and they can make it to 4 seconds, like sitting still.
Then they need to fidget.
And then they fidget and they giggle or something. Yeah. And I say, okay, now here's what we're going to do. We're going to sit up straight. We're going to put our feet flat on the ground. And we're going to do, like, I mean, I'm sure you've heard of this sort of mind exercise where examine your feet. Okay, are your feet relaxed? Relax your feet. Okay.
Bro, you're doing this in your music lessons with kids.
Oh, yeah.
Can I just say, amazing, kudos. I love that approach, and it's so wise because how are they going to be successful in the practice room at home where all the growth happens, right?
Yeah.
Not in the lesson.
Oh yeah.
Unless they can actually sit still long enough to focus on being fascinated by the little problem they're solving.
Exactly,
right?
yeah. So I do that. I make them do a body scan and make sure every
yoga
part of
nidra.
them exactly. Make sure every part of them is relaxed, and then I time them, see how long they can sit still. They make it to like 30 seconds.
And how do they feel? They probably feel better. Right?
They feel better, and they all of a sudden their demeanor's different, right? Like they're not doing all this, right?
Probably they're going from beta waves to alpha, a little bit of alpha wave, brainwave activity.
Yeah.
Are you into that stuff, brainwave stuff?
Like I meditate and stuff. Yeah. There's certain, when it comes to like, I guess spirituality and that whole thing, I think there's a lot of principles that religion ties into a lot of that. And there's a whole, like, I don't like to get into, I think I prefer like general principles. So when it comes to like to me, like meditation is just figuring out how our brain works and getting control of it, right? So a lot of people have assumptions about how their brain works, and they're not operating at as high of a level as they could be if they knew, like for example, when I get my students to practice something 2 times in a row, and then take a break. 10-second break. I heard this. I think it was, Andrew Huberman was talking about just if you're taking advantage of how our brain works. They did a study where they had 2 groups of people playing the piano. They had one group practice a set of notes just nonstop, no breaks. Then they had another group do 10 seconds on, 10 seconds off.
Okay.
That group that did 10 seconds off, 10 seconds on was their retention level was way higher.
High, huh?
Oh man, big crazy difference. So when I start my students learning something new, and it always works out to 20 because I make them go 2 times in a row, 10-second break, another 2 times in a row, and I make them do that up to 10. If they make a mistake, I slow the metronome down and we start over.
Okay, so you're essentially practicing it 20 times in a row, but with
breaks.
these breaks
Then
interspersed.
you
Perfect.
work up to 5 in a row times 4.
Right.
Then 10 in a row times 2.
And
Then 20 in a row. And then I always say, like, if you guys want to get extreme with it, you could do 20 in a row 5 times
to get 100.
I do that sometimes every now and again. Like I remember I had to do a.
Did you all? Can I ask a question about this? Because this is how I used to practice when I was a kid.
Yeah.
But no one told me to do it that way.
Oh really?
I just was like, I set little goals for myself when I was learning. I mainly was a drummer.
Yeah.
Like I played a lot of drums.
Yeah.
Went to school for that. And I did take piano lessons, but I couldn't ever really get the reading thing. So once I found drums, I was way more into that.
Right.
But yeah, I would be like, okay, I can't stop practicing until I can do this 10 times in a row, no mistakes. And then I'd sometimes get to the 9th time and you'd screw up. And I always held myself accountable, and because I didn't let myself off the hook. And that little goal of doing it without mistakes 10 times in a row kept me at the drums sometimes hours longer than I would have done if I just practiced a little bit and then was like, all right, I'm done.
Oh, yeah. And sometimes I have to battle with that. Like, I'll ask, a student might not feel like they're getting better, and I'll be like, well, how much are you when you sit down to practice, how long? Oh, like 10 minutes. And I go, okay, how long are you playing video games for? Like 2 hours?
Right, yeah.
I'm like, and I get it, because video games are fun and stimulating, right?
Mm-hmm.
Where it's like, okay, just cut a half hour out of your video game time. You can still play video games for an hour and a half.
Yeah.
And if you just practice, like, up it to a half hour a day on the guitar or the drums or whatever, then you're going to, trust me, you'll see a big difference, right?
Yeah.
And then every day, too. Like, I had some students where they didn't have drum kits at first, and it's always such you never want to go to a parent and say, hey, you got to spend money.
And especially on a drum kit that's going to be loud and obnoxious in their minds.
Exactly. Right? And so a lot of parents will start them off on an electric kit, and I hate electric drum kits so much.
I could never sound good or feel good playing one. It's weird.
I mean, okay, I guess there's room for everything. Like if there's a sound you're going for, sometimes an electric drum kit is the way to go, but for me, I'm never going for that sound. So a regular, and plus just the touch, right?
Well, especially at that point, why not if it's just all MIDI, why not just program it?
Yeah,
why have a person playing it? If depending on if it's live,
right? Yeah, sound. And I know some people who they deal because volume issues.
I guess also timing. You can have a more human feel,
right? Yeah, and so. But
the feel of the touch of the drums is lost.
Oh,
right?
because depending on where you hit the snare drum, it makes a different sound. Especially if you have like a nice maple snare drum that has I love it. I know I hate when people dampen their drums so much.
Too much, yeah.
Yeah, because the natural sound of the drum is so good.
Yeah.
It just takes a little bit of control to get used to, right? And I love that. I'd way rather hear the resonant of like the shell, resonating of the shell of the drum.
I was going to ask you about this. When you rehearse, do you try and keep your volume fairly low?
On the drums?
When you're playing guitar at a rehearsal, how loud do your rehearsals get? Let's say it's jazz.
So I'll talk about like the band I have, Fat Daphne.
Okay.
We go out of our way. I'll turn up my amp and I'll have Nick turn up his amp, and then we'll practice playing as quietly as possible.
Because I was like, okay,
if you can play like especially Don, like if you go. That's
when
great.
The amp is cranked.
Yeah, that's great for control. And then plus two, like then it makes it sounds better too. Like
it gives you more dynamic range.
So like
too,
I'll turn down a little bit here, and if I'm like
so
that
are you
sounds
riding
hard,
the volume knob throughout a performance at times?
I don't.
Or do you not?
I never mess with my knobs. No? It's all touch for me, and I'm not gonna knock it. I saw Julian Lage live,
Mm-hmm.
and to me, he's the epitome of just guitar straight through an amp. He doesn't
Yeah.
play with any pedals or anything, right?
Wow.
And
Is that what's happening here? Your guitar just into this Fender?
Guitar into the amp. Yeah, pedals are a challenge. I actually had to use. I played in a musical one time, and we had to go from like heavy distortion to clean.
So you needed
And
a pedal?
I had to time the pedal, and I had to practice it.
Sure,
It was a hassle, and so I like it where if I'm playing nice and soft, it sounds pretty clean. But if
Yeah.
now
You get a little crunch.
breaks up,
Yeah,
it
yeah,
crunch,
yeah.
and I like sometimes a harsh sound like that where.
Did you ever explore the Wes Montgomery thing, playing more with your thumb?
I recently, because I've got the student who's
Yeah.
it's
Yeah,
a
dude.
sound, man. Like, and actually, so I played that arrangement where he goes. If I play it with my thumb and I go.
Wow, it sounds totally different. Bro,
That already sounds more
it sounds
like Wes, right?
completely different.
It's-
Do it again. I want to. I
Yeah,
want to
so, like-
focus on the
like,
contrast,
yeah.
but then with the pick
So
after.
here I'll play with the pick. Oh, sorry. Right,
Yeah.
and then with the thumb.
Hey,
That-
kudos to your student for his universal musical ear,
Yeah,
picking
yeah.
that beautiful melody out and saying, "I want to
Oh,
learn
man.
it." That's a great taste.
But even when
That's
I
great
just
taste.
play that with my thumb, regardless of I think Wes rolled his tone all the way off. I don't do that. I roll it off just slightly.
Yeah.
I like to have a little more expressiveness in that way. But
Hmm.
even regardless of whatever you have your amp set at, I'll do it on an acoustic guitar. And when I do it with my thumb like that, it already sounds more like Wes.
Yeah.
No one's ever gonna sound exactly like Wes. George Benson got close, right? But
Yes, exactly. I love George
just
Benson.
those little things of even those first couple notes, hitting those with my thumb already sounds more like Wes's first couple notes, right?
Yeah.
So
Okay, listen, brother.
Yeah.
I think we should. I want to hear closing thoughts from you. Anything
Sure.
that you feel like you want to touch that we didn't touch on, and then let's let's wrap it up with one more tune. I think. How does that feel for you?
Anything I feel like I didn't touch on?
Like we've had a great conversation. I don't know that. It became clear that you learned, and basically you're self-taught. Would you say that? Did you
Yeah.
take lessons?
I've taken
other than YouTube. You said you learned a lot
the
about
only
YouTube.
lessons I've ever taken in my life, I took 3 lessons this year. 2 with this guy Aaron Shore,
Who lives in Calgary.
monster
Aaron,
player.
you want to come on the podcast? Love to have
He's a
you.
great player, and I remember seeing part of why I wanted to listen because he played really cleanly, and he played really he seemed like he was barely trying. It was like nothing.
Can I interject here?
Yeah.
When Mikey's on 12th, I don't know if you ever went there when they were doing a Sunday night.
I never was
Sunday
able
evening.
to make it to the.
They
Sunday
did these
jam.
jazz jams. Shane Stats hosted.
Yeah.
Also, Shane, please come on the podcast. Him and I gig sometimes together.
Mm-hmm.
Dude, horror story.
Oh,
My
yeah.
last gig was Shane Stats. This is like
yeah?
confession time. Shane, it's funny. This is a freaking hilarious story.
Yeah.
I had a early meeting this particular Thursday, which threw my whole morning routine off, and it was with a client. So I was like, I had to be on. I was presenting a bunch of stuff, and we were trying to, close some business.
Yeah.
Then I forgot to take my ADHD medication, which I am on a specific dose of 5 ants.
Oh yeah.
I'm not ashamed about that because it helps me.
Hey.
It does help me focus. But
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
the problem is after taking it for so long, if I don't take it, I become super lethargic throughout the day. I have low energy, which happened that day, and I didn't realize it until about 2 p.m., which is way too late to take it again. So I had to just suffer through the day.
Right.
And then when my work day was done, I was just exhausted, feeling kind of crappy, laying on the couch, and I happened to watching some TV or whatever, and I happened to look at my phone, and it's Shane texting me saying, "Okay, hey, when I get there, I'll load in," and I'm like, I have a gig tonight. Holy shit. And I showed up and missed the whole first set at Prohibition.
Oh, no.
And it felt like such a I was so apologetic, and he was super cool. Everyone was cool about it. But it was really embarrassing.
Yeah.
To miss the first whole set, and he's a sax player, so he had to just kind of play solo. Right?
Oh yeah.
But anyways, I don't know where I was going with that, but back to your last kind of closing thoughts and things that you want to share. Oh, I was going to say the last thing I was going to say. Sorry, I did take my meds today, but it might seem like I'm not. At Mikey's, where Shane used to host, Aaron Shore was there one night, and I asked him after they played. He was in the house band.
Yeah.
I think he played All the Things You Are. That'd be a nice song to end with.
Yeah.
Do you want to end with
yeah,
that?
absolutely.
He played All the Things You Are, and I was so impressed by the very thing you were talking about, how effortlessly and cleanly he played his lines. So I asked him, what do you recommend for someone like me? Because he heard me play and jam and everything. And he just said, do everything super slow.
Yep.
Slower the better. Go slow to go fast.
Yeah.
And then I started practicing. I love my little old school metronome. I put it on 40, and I practice that Barry Harris chromatic scale exercise that you taught me, and I keep subdividing. Yeah. Explain that to people, because that's a thing people should know.
So I will say there's there's a couple YouTube channels. One is Things I've Learned from Barry Harris. Chris Parks runs that.
Amazing.
And so if you ever want to dig deeper into Barry Harris and you're a guitar player, I would check out that.
And the Robbie Barnby video about the 6 diminished scale.
Oh, sure.
You know that one? Where he goes over the whole theory.
I don't know about him specific, but I've seen it there's
one called
now.
if you just Google 6 diminished, it's got 400,000 views, and it's this British guy.
Sure.
It's really good.
So Barry, he had this where if you go any scale,
we'll do a major scale just so it's easy.
It's just E flat major scale. So if there's a whole step between the note, like E flat to F, you would play a chromatic. Yeah. And then same thing, F to G.
Yeah.
But now when you're going to A flat, there's a half step there, so there's no note between there. You jump to the next scale note.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah.
And so that works great, because then you can then your chord tones land on downbeats, and your non-chord tones are on upbeats, and so that way, a lot of people struggle. They're like,
your lines on a 3 or a 1.
And it's like, how do I incorporate chromaticism into my playing without it losing the sense of the form? And this is a great way to do it, right? So, or whatever you can do. You could even do the, like, let's say you're on 2/5. So under that would have been like a
and go play that. Yeah. But that scale, then I started practicing that 2 hands. I was showing you the other day, and then I'm going in contrary motion only on 8th notes at 40 though.
Yep.
And then but then I start to subdivide it, and because that scale has those extra notes in it, it starts to flow across the bar line, forcing you, especially on triplets, forcing you to be really clear about where the strong beats are relative to this metronome that's just doing this. But I'm going but it's like, because it's 4/3, the phrasing gets off, and it took me so long for my brain not to just hear it as a 4-note pattern thing repeating, and to hear it as triplets. And I had to really emphasize the accents on one. Yeah. Like if you played that scale in triplets, you'd have to accent dugga da dugga da dugga da dugga da. Exactly, bro. Exactly. So that helped me. And so that's a great way, I think, to end this off by me thanking you, first of all, for showing me so much stuff. Like when we first met, it was at Asylum for Art when they were doing those Sunday night jams with Sanaa, wasn't it?
Yeah. Either Asylum or Cav. It must have been Asylum.
It must have been Asylum, because I didn't go to Cav for a long time because they didn't have a good piano. But then that problem was solved. I gave them mine.
Oh, you get right. Yeah, they have a better one now.
The Yamaha. Anyway, it's sort of like, I'm like, I don't need this piano. I have enough.
Yeah. Well, you've been very generous, like with a lot of that. You lend your stuff out, and you're always very, which is great.
Well, I feel like
it's people like you that help propel things forward, right?
Bro, it's been an absolute pleasure to get to know you, to host you here whenever you're in town. You're always welcome to stay.
Likewise, man.
And just playing music with you too, and having this conversation. I think there's so many pieces of wisdom and knowledge that you share just very naturally throughout this that it's going to be really interesting and helpful to a lot of people.
Oh, thanks,
and I have to say, your passion for teaching and the intentionality that you take with it to not just treat it like a job and get through these kids so that I can go home and do what I really want to do.
No,
sometimes you get that vibe though from
well,
teachers.
we have recitals, and I care how they do at the recitals.
Yeah, and you're saying, yours tend to sound great. I won't.
Oh yeah, no,
know?
I mean,
That's awesome.
I'll say it. I think my students do really great at the recitals because I just make them do things over and over again until they can't do it incorrectly, right? So
And I think there's a lot of people out there, kids and adults, who love music, want to explore it, but are intimidated by it because they, see it as this big obstacle and they don't want to sound bad and all this other stuff.
Yeah.
And there are certain atmospheres, like for instance, certain conservatories that I've been around, where that attitude of sort of an exclusivity and a fear, kind of makes people afraid of music. Have you ever come across that with kids or adults? I see it more in adults that are like intimidated by the concept.
I always have to give them. I always give my students this kind of spiel where I say, "Listen, there's two really bad dispositions to have about this, and there's one really good one. You don't want to think, oh, I'm the best, I don't need to work on this whatsoever, because that's just arrogant. You don't want that. But you also don't want to be, oh, I suck, I can't do this. You want to be in a spot where, oh yeah, I'm happy with where I'm at, and then also if you can, because I'm gonna tell a kid if he's not, or an adult if they're not doing something correctly, I'm gonna say, hey, this isn't happening, but don't be down on it. That's okay, because now we have a path forward to work on this, right? That's great. And so like I have a couple students where I tell this one kid, man, I tell him, I'll be like, okay, you did that pretty good, but we're gonna I want you to focus on maybe picking a little less harshly, right? And it's because you're getting better that I have to be more nitpicky in order for you to get better. And he's like this, he's like, okay, let's do it. He's really
amazing,
Oh, and he's a joy to teach, right? Because I have my lesson plan and we get through it in 20 minutes, and I'm like, oh, I guess we can do some bonus stuff now, right? But I guess
those are the ones that I had one like that. I'll call him by name, Spencer Shane, I think is how I pronounce his last name. He was 14 years old and he wanted to take drum lessons. He was playing violin in this orchestra. I happened to play drums in it, and he came for 1 year when I was out of college. I was young teaching. Yeah. He is a really well-known engineer and drummer in town, and he went off and became a phenomenal jazz, just overall musician, jazz drummer. Spent time in New York, and I only taught him for a year because he blasted through everything I gave him. He'd come back the next week and be like, "Hey, I'm done. No, next." And I eventually referred him to Andy Erickson, who's a guy in town, who at the time you had to audition to be his student. So I'm like, Andy, this guy's gone through everything. I can't keep, but he's amazing. Just take him on. And so he called me after Spencer audition. He's like, how long did you say he's been playing? This guy's incredible. Oh, only after 1 year, man.
Yeah.
He's a monster already.
It's crazy what
it sounds like this student of yours might be on that same path.
Oh, he's real young. I think he's like 7 or whatever. So he's like, his guitar is even still a little too big for him. But he's just so willing to. And I think part of that is too, his parents are really good at instilling a sense of discipline in him. His parents ask what's a good practice routine to put him on. But I think a good sort of closing statement would be all these kind of little practice, you call them practice hacks, practice tips, whatever. They apply to literally any discipline you want to do. So doing something slowly 20 times in a row. I do that with kickboxing. I'll do combos slowly in the mirror 20 times in a row. And so basically it's this. Once you know the way broadly, you will see it in all things.
Ooh, beautiful.
Yeah.
Let's end with that. Let's play all the things.
For sure.
And we'll wrap this up. Yeah, Amazing, man. Thank you.
Oh, yeah, thank you. Do the intro. You cool with 1, 2, 3, 4.
Bye.